You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 12. The urgent Vanguard strives for merit at the parade ground. The blue-faced brute takes part in the military sports. Yang Zhi and Zhou Jin were mounted on their horses, but while waiting at the foot of the flagpole for the signal to start, the staff officer Wenda shouted out, "Wait a bit." He then went to Grand Secretary Liang on the platform and said to him, "Sir, we do not yet know what skill these two men have in military sports, but their arms are dangerous weapons suitable for killing thieves and exterminating bandits. I am afraid that today somebody may be seriously wounded. A slight blow might cripple a man for life, whereas a serious blow might kill a man, and that would not be for the good of the army. So I beg to suggest that the spikes should be removed from the spears and replaced by the felt. Then they should both wear black dress. The felt knobs on the spears should then be rubbed in lime dust so that they would leave a mark on the clothing for each hit, and the man who has the most white marks will be the loser." "That is a sensible proposal," said the Grand Secretary Liang. Orders were given accordingly. Upon receiving the order, the two horsemen retired behind the platform, where the spikes were removed from their spears and replaced by the knobs of felt. They rubbed these knobs well with lime dust and put on some black clothing. When this had been done, they remounted and rode round to the drill ground. Zhou Jin urged his horse forward to fight with Yanji, and the latter did the same. They both dashed past each other, returned again, backwards and forwards many times, thrusting and parrying as they passed. After about 50 of these passages at arms, Zhou Jin had so many white spots on his clothes that he looked as though somebody had thrown bean curd at him, whereas Yanji had only one single white spot under his left shoulder. Grand Secretary Liang was much pleased at this, and summoning Zhou Jin, he spoke to him. "My predecessor gave you a commission as lieutenant, but I think your military skill is of poor quality, as you have been beaten in this way. So how can you fight anywhere and continue to receive a lieutenant's salary?" He then summoned Yanji and gave him the position of Zhou Jin. Just then General Li Qing arrived on the platform and reported to Grand Secretary Liang that Zhou Jin's use of the spear was very poor, but as a mounted archer he was excellent. For that reason he must not be dismissed from his position, as the troops would be dissatisfied if that was done. Perhaps it would be better if Zhou Jin and Yanji now contested as archers. Grand Secretary Liang thought that a good idea and gave instructions accordingly. Upon receiving this order, Zhou Jin and Yanji both stuck their spears in the ground and armed themselves with bows and arrows. Yanji took the bow out of its case, adjusted the string, then raising it aloft he mounted his horse and rode to the front of the platform, where he saluted the Grand Secretary Liang by rising in his stirrups and said, "I am afraid, sir, that one of us may be wounded by an arrow, and I ask for your instructions in the matter." Grand Secretary Liang said, "In military sports one should not display anxiety about wounds. If someone is killed by an arrow, we shall not hold a court-martial." Yanji returned to the parade ground, and General Li Qing then gave an order that each combatant should bear a rattan shield to protect his body from the arrows being shot. Both combatants took a shield and hung it on his shoulder. Yanji then told his opponent that he could have 3 shots at him, and he would follow with 3 shots. Zhou Jin, upon hearing this, only wished that he could shoot an arrow that would go right through Yanji's body. On the other hand, Yang Qin saw that Zhou Jin had no skill and was not afraid of him. Just then the purple signaling flag was waved from the platform, and Yanji urged his horse forward and rode towards the south side. Zhou Jin followed him and dropped the reins on the saddle. With the bow in his left hand, he took an arrow in his right hand, aimed at Yanji's back, and pulling the bow to its full extent and let fly the arrow. Yanji heard the twang of the bow string and immediately swung his body down, resting entirely on one stirrup. The arrow flew past without touching him. Upon seeing that the arrow had missed its mark, Zhou Jin was very much upset. He immediately took a second arrow out of his quiver, fitted it to his bow, took a steady aim at Yanji's back, and again let fly the arrow. Yanji heard the arrow flying through the air, and taking his bow, turned round, and parried the arrow by a stroke of his bow. The arrow turned several somersaults ere it reached the ground. This made Zhou Jin more annoyed than ever. As Yanji had now reached the extreme limit of the parade ground, he wheeled his horse round and galloped back to the platform. Zhou Jin also galloped back to the same spot, and there the two horses pranced about impatiently. Zhou Jin now took his third arrow from his quiver, fixed it carefully to the bowstring, and exerting his full strength, drew the bow to its full extent and shot the arrow again at Yangji's back. But Yanji again heard the twang of the bowstring, and turning round in his saddle he caught the arrow with his hand as it flew past him. Then urging his horse forward he galloped to the front of the inspection platform, and there threw the arrow on the ground. Upon seeing this feat of skill, Grand Secretary Liang was much pleased, and gave an order that Yanji must now shoot 3 arrows at Zhou Jin. The purple flag was again waved to signal that the sport was to continue. Zhou Jin threw down his bow, and taking his shield in his hand he urged his horse forward, and rode towards the southern part of the parade ground. Yanji, stooping forward in his saddle, urged his horse in the same direction. He then drew the string of his bow, without placing an arrow there, and let the bowstring go. Zhou Jin, hearing the twang of the bowstring, turned round, and held his shield to protect his body, but no arrow came. He thought that Yanji might be good with a spear, but evidently he could not even shoot an arrow. He continued his course, and decided that if the second attempt was also a failure he would shout out, and claim a win. As he had now reached the limit of the parade ground he wheeled round, and returned to the platform again. Upon seeing this, Yanji also wheeled his horse round, and returned to the same spot. By that time Yanji had taken an arrow out of his quiver, and fitted it to his bowstring. He thought that if he shot the arrow at Zhou Jin's back he would probably kill him. As he had no enmity towards Zhou Jin, he decided to shoot an arrow, and hit him in some non-vital spot. In his left hand he held the bow as firmly as a mountain, while in his right hand he held the arrow as lightly as though he carried a baby. So pulling his bowstring to its full extent until the bow was like a full moon in shape, he shot the arrow, which flew with the speed of a falling star, and struck Zhou Jin's shoulder. This occurred much quicker than it takes us to describe it. Zhou Jin fell off his horse, and the animal being free galloped off to the back of the inspection platform. A number of soldiers came forward to help Zhou Jin to get up. Grand Secretary Liang was again much pleased at seeing this, and summoning his adjutant he dictated an order that Yanji take the rank and position of Zhou Jin. Yanji heard this, but did not allow his feelings to be visible in his face. He dismounted and approaching the inspection platform saluted, and offered thanks for his promotion. Just then, however, a man ascended the steps leading to the inspection platform on the left side, and called out, "You need not offer thanks for your promotion. I will have a couple of bouts with you." Yanji saw that the man was over 7 feet in height, had a round face with large ears, a broad and square-shaped mouth, with bushy side whiskers, a general austere, dignified, and handsome appearance. Coming before the Grand Secretary he called out, "Sir, Zhou Jin has evidently not quite recovered from a sickness, and not being in the best of health, has been defeated by Yanji. Though I have no particular ability, yet I am quite willing to compete with Yanji. If Yanji defeats me even only slightly, then I shall be quite willing to let him take my rank and position instead of Zhou Jin's. Even if he kills me it won't matter." Grand Secretary Liang recognized the man as Captain Suo Chao of the headquarters at the northern capital, Daming. He had a fiery disposition, and would invariably fought for the honor of the state, and even killed men so that everybody called him the Urgent Vanguard. General Liang, upon hearing the man make this statement, left the inspection platform, and going round to the front of it addressed the Grand Secretary, "Sir, Yanji was previously an officer in the Imperial Guard, and therefore it is only to be expected that his skill in military sports would be better than that of Zhou Jin. I think it would be a good idea if Yanji now contested with Captain Suo, and then we should see exactly who is the better man." Grand Secretary Liang thought the matter over. He certainly wished to give Yanji an officer's commission, but as so many were opposed to that, he would wait until Yanji had defeated Suo Chao, so that nobody could then raise any objection even if Suo Chao was killed. So he summoned Yanji and asked him, would you care to compete against Suo Chao in the military sports? Yanji replied, Sir, if you give me an order I must obey it. Liang said, In that case you had better go behind this platform, and put on your full armor. Also tell the armor to accompany you and give you whatever you require in the way of accoutrement. You can also take my warhorse and ride it. Now, be careful, and do not treat your opponent too lightly. Yanji expressed his thanks, and retired to put on his armor, etc. General Liang went and spoke to Suo Chao. You, of course, cannot be compared to anyone else. Zhou Jin was a pupil of yours, but he has just been defeated by Yanji. If you be also only slightly defeated by Yanji, he will make nothing of all the officers at Daming. I will lend you my superb war horse, and also a suit of armor. I hope that you will take care, as I do not want a man with your valor to be defeated. Suo Chao thanked him, and then went off to dress. Grand Secretary Liang got up, and walked to the front of the inspection platform near the railings, and there the attendants brought his chair. He also told the umbrella bearers to open there the large official umbrella made of brown gauze, with a silver button on top, and with 3 fringes round to make it cool on hot days, and they were to hold it aloft behind his chair. On both sides of him the officers took their positions in 2 ranks. He then instructed the officer in charge to wave the red flag as a signal that the sports were to proceed. The gongs and drums on both sides were beaten, so that they gave a low rolling sound like thunder. In the center of the parade ground 2 cannons were fired off. Upon this signal Suo Chao galloped to the parade ground, and took up his position at the foot of the flagstaff near the cannons, surrounded by the soldiers on parade. Yanji also galloped forward, and took his position behind the flag on the opposite side. On the inspection platform the yellow flag was waved, and upon this all the drums again rolled, and the troops cheered. After that there was absolute silence. A gong was now sounded, and a white flag was hoisted up on a pole on the inspection platform. The officers stood to attention, and there was not a single word spoken after this. A purple flag was now waved on the platform, and the drums rolled again for the third and last time, upon which Suo Chao left his position, and rode in front of the platform where he took his arms, and certainly gave the audience the impression that he was a valiant warrior. On his head he wore a steel helmet with a lion design on it, and a large red tassel hanging down at the back. His body was covered by armor in the form of iron leaves linked together. Round his waist was a silk belt with a buckle with a tiger's head design in gold. On his breast and also on his back was a bronze protecting mirror. His outer garment was of red silk with a design of florid circles all over it. On each side there hung a green silk sash. His big riding boots had strips of leather on them in a slanting direction. A bow was at his left side, and a quiver with arrows on his right. In his hand was a large battle-axe, and he was riding the trained war horse, as white as snow, belonging to General Liang. From the other side Yanji galloped to the front of the platform, where he reined in his horse, with a spear in his hand, and with a very bold appearance. He was wearing a fine steel helmet which glittered in the sun, and had a green tassel hanging down at the back. His armor was made up of iron in the form of plum blossoms and leaves of the elm tree all linked together. His silk sash was of red color. On his breast and back were 2 protecting metal mirrors. His outer coat was of white silk, and holding it in position was a belt of purple silken texture. His small boots were of undyed leather. At his side was a bow, and also a quiver full of arrows. In his hands he carried a heavy steel spear, and he was riding the Grand Secretary's red war horse, which was capable of galloping about 300 li against the wind. The troops and officers on both sides approved of both combatants in whispers, and although they did not yet exhibit their military skill, yet their grand majestic appearance had already made a bold impression. On the south side of the parade ground an officer now waved a flag with the character Ling 58 in gold, and riding up on his horse called out, His Excellency orders both of you to exercise great care. Whoever of you is defeated will have to suffer the punishment, and the one who wins will be handsomely rewarded. The 2 combatants after receiving this order pressed their horses to the center of the parade ground, where they passed each other backwards and forwards several times, holding their arms ready in their hands, and watching for a chance of dealing a serious blow. Suo Chao lost his temper and brandishing his battle-axe challenged Yanji to fight. But Yanji was not afraid of this, and holding his spear in both hands he also charged towards Sua Chao. They met in front of the inspection platform, and there they both used their utmost skill. Backwards and forwards they went, lunging, slashing, and parrying, and each time they met there was a general whirl of their arms and the legs of their horses. After more than 50 bouts neither of them had either won or lost. Grand Secretary Liang was lost in admiration as he watched this marvelous display. The officers kept up a general round of applause. Among the troops on parade there were general remarks passed to one another such as, "We have been in the army for many years and taken part in several battles, but we have never seen such a deadly conflict between such fine men." On the inspection platform the two generals Li Cheng and Wenda kept up an incessant comment, "Well done. Well done." In fact, Wenda was so afraid that one of the two combatants would be seriously wounded that he gave the signaler an order to take the flag with the golden character Ling on it and place it between the combatants as a signal that fighting was to cease. At the same time a gong on the inspection platform was sounded as a signal for the two men to stop fighting, but they were both so keen on winning that they would not rein in their horses or leave the spot. As the gong had no effect the signaling officer rushed towards the combatants and shouted out, "You two must take a rest now. This is His Excellency's order." Yanji and Sua Chao upon hearing this both reined in their horses and returned each to his respective flag to await further orders. The generals Li Cheng and Wenda came forward to the front of the platform and addressed the Grand Secretary, "Sir, we think that the military skill of both these men is of high order, and their merit is worthy of reward." Upon hearing this Grand Secretary Liang was much pleased and immediately summoned Yanji and Sua Chao. The signaling officer transmitted the order, and both combatants came to the front of the inspection platform, where they dismounted. Two soldiers received their weapons, and the two heroes then ascended the platform, where they stood in a respectful attitude. Grand Secretary Liang gave instructions that each was to receive an ingot of silver and 2 suits of clothing as presents, and then instructed his adjutant that both men were to receive the rank of major, and that an order must be issued accordingly. Their commission was to take effect from that day. The two heroes expressed thanks to the Grand Secretary, received the gifts, and leaving the platform they divested themselves of their swords, bows, armor, and put on their ordinary clothes. They then returned to the platform and saluted the assembled officers. They saluted each other according to the instructions of Liang, who then informed them that they both had the rank of major. The troops marched off to the accompaniment of their drums. Grand Secretary Liang invited all the officers to dine with him. They feasted together until dusk when Grand Secretary Liang and all the other officers departed on horseback, the two majors riding in front with red silk flowers in their caps. Upon entering the east gate the people stood on both sides of the road and welcomed the cavalcade. Grand Secretary Liang on his horse asked, "Why are you people so pleased at seeing this?" The old men in the crowd responded, "We were born and bred at Daming, and never before have we seen such splendid fellows as these two. Today we have seen them on the parade ground, and know that they are equally matched. So why should we not be glad?" Grand Secretary Liang was very pleased at hearing this. Upon arrival at the headquarters all the officers dispersed. The comrades of Sua Chao invited him to a banquet in celebration of his feat, but as Yanji had only recently arrived he had no acquaintances who would invite him to a feast. He went to his quarters to sleep. Yanji after this attended to his duties very diligently all day long, but we need not say anything more about that. We will now come to the point. After the affair at the military sports, Grand Secretary Liang was fonder than ever of Yanji, and they were always together. As Yanji had a monthly allowance, many persons wished to be friendly with him. Now Sua Chao had great respect for Yanji, because he knew that he had great military skill. The time flew very quickly, and it was almost summer. Grand Secretary Liang and his wife Madame Liang were celebrating the Dragon Boat Festival with a feast in the private apartments. When they had drunk several cups of wine and partaken of 2 courses of food, Madame Liang said, "Sir, you are now Commander-in-Chief and control the army, but where did this great success and rank come from?" Grand Secretary Liang replied, I have been a student of the classics and history ever since I was a boy. I am not blockhead, and how can I be unaware of your father's generosity? He assisted me a great deal, and I am very grateful to him. His wife replied, Sir, you are aware of my father's benevolence, but why have you forgotten his birthday? Liang said, I am well aware that your father's birthday is on the 15th day of the 6th month. A month ago I sent a man with 100,000 strings of cash to buy gold, pearls, and other valuables which I will send to your father as a birthday gift. That will shortly be all arranged, and then I will dispatch the presents. About that only one thing keeps me in hesitation. Last year I also bought many precious stones and jewelry and dispatched them to your father at the eastern capital, but when about halfway there the escort was attacked by some brigands who took away the whole presents, and up to the present time the brigands have not been captured. Who is the best man to escort the presents this year? Madame Liang replied, In your employ you have plenty of soldiers from whom you can select a reliable man. Grand Secretary Liang said, During the next month I will look round carefully, and select a really reliable man whom I will entrust with that job. You need not worry any more about it, as I have a plan. They feasted together up to about 10 o'clock that evening, but we need not pursue that matter any further. At that time a new magistrate named Shi Wenbin had just been appointed to Yunqing County at Jizhou Prefecture in Shandong Province. Upon taking up his duties he at once summoned 2 inspectors and officers, whose special work was suppression of banditry. One inspector was in charge of mounted police consisting of 20 men armed with bows and arrows, and 20 local men. The other inspector had 20-foot soldiers armed with spear, and also 20 local men. The inspector in charge of the mounted police was named Zhu Tong. He was over 6 feet in height, had a thick beard nearly 2 feet long, his face was fiery red, and he had piercing eyes. In appearance he resembled Guan Gong, the god of war very much, and he was well known everywhere as the Beautiful Whiskers. Previously he was a very wealthy man, and being generous he had become friendly with all the leaders of bandits from whom he had acquired great ability in using arms. The inspector in charge of the other platoon was named Liang. He was about 5.5 feet tall, had a swarthy complexion, a broad fan-like beard, and great muscular strength. He could jump a distance of 20 feet, and was known everywhere as the Winged Tiger. Previously he had been a blacksmith, then had changed his occupation, and became a proprietor of rice-grinding mills, a butcher, or even a gambler. He was sometimes a great defender of righteousness, but he was not of a generous disposition. He was also versed in military skill. These 2 inspectors were experts in suppressing brigandage. Now the magistrate summoned them to his yamen, and handing them his written order he said, Since I took up my duties here I have learned a great deal of a large number of bandits at Liangshan Marsh, a village in this prefecture, who have not only robbed and looted, but have even resisted capture by our troops. I am also afraid that there are other bandits in the various villages. So I want you 2 to face this difficult matter with our police force, 1 platoon to go out through the west gate, and the other through the east gate. If you find any bandits then arrest them, and report the matter at once. In doing this, however, you must not disturb the people. I am aware that at Dongxi village there is a tree, on the top of a hill, with red leaves, and there is no other tree like that at anywhere else. I want you to pluck some of those leaves, and upon your presenting them to me I shall know that you have been at that place. If you return without the red leaves I shall not accept any excuse, but shall punish you severely. The 2 inspectors took the order, and left the court. They called the rolls of their platoons, and then filed off according to the order. We need not follow the platoon under Inspector Zhu Tong which left by the west gate. But the platoon of 20 soldiers under Inspector Liang left by the east gate, and duly reached the hill at Dongxi village where they plucked some of the red leaves, and then returned to the village. Leaving the village they came to the Lingguan temple in about a li. Inspector Liang noticed that the gate of the temple was open, and he wondered why this was since he knew there were no priests living there at the time. As he suspected some irregularity, he decided to look inside. As it was almost dark they lit torches, and then entered the temple. There they found a big man sleeping on the altar table with naked body. He had made a pillow of a lot of torn clothing, and was snoring loudly. How strange. How strange. Inspector Liang said. Our magistrate evidently knew that there have been some bandits at the Domshi village. He then shouted in a loud voice and awoke the man who attempted to get up, but was seized by the soldiers and bound with ropes. They then all left the temple and took their prisoner to the village chief. For brave men of Eastern Stream. Captured jewels with bold scheme. As earthly spirits they did their feat. As heavenly gods they came to meet. In the next chapter we will narrate what this village was that Inspector Liang went to. Footnote. 58 Command or Order.